everyone. My name is Paula Camperman. I'm the Outreach Program Manager for the Bennington County Solid Waste Alliance. And today I am joined by Lisa Beyer. Today we're going to do Trash Talk.
Yes, it's been almost 2 years since we've done Trash Talk, so I'm anxious to do some trashy talking.
Yes. So I thought we would pick up and get everybody up to speed about what's been happening in the recycling markets, because there has been some really great changes, and I think people need to know about it because we've seen a lot of press about how low recycling is nationwide and why waste your time doing it. Some municipal entities have actually ceased some recycling programs because of the lack of markets to actually buy the raw materials. That's not the case in Vermont, though. So I wanted to share this information with the people watching today and help give you confidence that recycling that you're doing, keep on doing it because it's really for a good cause. A lot has happened since the China Sword program, which was the national program China used to change the way they were going to accept plastic materials. What that meant is they weren't going to accept just container ships full of plastic materials anymore unless they had at least a 95% purity rate.
Right, I remember we talked about that the last time.
Right, so since then, a lot of municipal markets collapsed, especially areas out in the West Coast where they didn't have any secondary markets to go sell their product to.
Okay.
However, here in Vermont, Casella Corporation, which is actually the largest corporation for waste management in the state. They run the two material recovery facilities in Rutland and Chittenden and do vast majority of the hauling around the area. They saw it coming and they basically went more specifically after domestic markets, and they pledge primarily all of their stuff going only to domestic markets. So they're not trucking it over or shipping it overseas.
So was that readily available to them? Or, I mean, why isn't that a solution for everyone? Are there just not enough domestic markets for the recycled materials?
To some, yes, to some instance. It depends on the material, and I'm not all familiar with all of the back-end demand and supply issues that are out there, but I do know that there's been a ramp up to try to meet the demand to process the raw material. So the plastics and paper and things that are coming in. So it's you know, you get there first, you get in line, you're going to be the one of the customers that get the service, I think, is part of it too. And Casella's been very effective at doing that.
Now, are they just a New England company, or are they nationwide?
They're primarily in the Northeast. I think they're in 12 states.
Okay.
Publicly traded on the NASDAQ, so they're, you know, an entity that's been around, as we know, since the 70s. So it's, and they understand, you know, markets, and they learned early on that recycling is something that isn't free. It's a market that has got a cost involved, and the costs ebb and flow based on the demand of what the feedstock is. That's the material that they're pulling off from our recycling bins and selling off to another market. So what they have to do is they've got to make it work for them and make it cost effective. So there was a time when recycling was in its heyday, for lack of a better word, when there was actually a shared revenue stream. That means money was actually paid back to the municipalities that were collecting the material for Casella, because Casella was making so much money. So they would say, okay, there's some for us and some for you. We'll pay you money to actually bring recycling to us, to the transfer stations and the materials recovery facilities. So that stopped after National Sword and other events because there was no market. So the price for that material that now was getting lots of good money and making everybody happy just bottomed out. So in 2019, Casella started charging its towns which were under a solid waste applications program. It's a special contract that was involving Arlington, Dorset, Manchester, Sandgate, and Sunderland to actually charge them for the recycling. So it was being charged at that point back in March of 2019, $85 a ton, and got to a high as $118 a ton. Well, today, now, actually even COVID, it's only being charged, we're only being charged $18 a ton. So it's come down considerably.
Because they now have an output for...
Yeah, there's a market for it. And the market is very high on demand right now. Things like plastic milk jugs, you wouldn't think too much about them, but they're in very high demand because it is a very suitable material for making into other items, whereas some plastics you can't really do much other than turn it back into a plastic bottle, or actually goes down into a more degraded form of plastic manufacturing.
And you're saying that the reason that this is because of the changes that China made, that the fact that they're not taking as much has caused this change here in our country.
Yes, that's part of it. I mean, with China, it's largely plastics, but there's other markets that ebb and flow as well, beyond just that. So this is good news. The other thing is, because of the pandemic, we have all kinds of online purchasing going on.
Right.
And so with shipping, ergo, there's tremendous amount of need for corrugated cardboard. Everything that comes and goes out of a FedEx truck is in a cardboard box. So that is something that was in actually short supply with at the height of the pandemic before vaccinations came around, and they were in need of feedstock. So they were, we're getting messages in the industry, tell people to make sure they recycle their cardboard because we need it. The Amazons of the world and the companies needed that, yeah. And it you can get I think, depending 4 to 7 rounds of cardboard out of the life of corrugated cardboard. You can recycle it up to 7 times, depending on what it is. Yeah, so it's worth doing, definitely, and rather than just throwing it in the trash. The other thing that's noticeably apparent that came to my attention recently is the actual recycling rate and how well the material that you're putting in the recycling bin is actually getting recycled. We've been hearing about the low recycling rates, about how much of the stuff is actually being recycled. You hear on nationwide, network news saying, oh, well, only 11% of the materials that we getting are actually being recycled, and of that, so much is going to the landfill anyway, because there's no market. Well, that's not the case in Vermont. The materials that come into the 2 materials recovery facilities, those are called MRFs, think of MRF.
Okay.
They are located, one's in Rutland and one is in Chittenden County.
Okay.
They, in Williston, on their tipping floor, that's all the material that gets dumped off the truck from the recycling curbsides, the transfer stations, everything.
State.
Yes.
Okay.
That everything that they collect gets dumped on the floor. 93% of it is indeed recycled. So it goes back out into a marketplace in some way, shape, or form, which is very encouraging. I didn't know it was even that high, and I just learned that.
So how does that compare to the rest of the country?
I've heard other states in the 40s.
So we're really doing a great job in Vermont.
Yeah, we are.
So that goes back to what you're doing is making a difference. So keep recycling.
Yeah, and make it so it's not contaminated too.
Well,
that's
that was
key.
going to be my next question, because I know that we talked a lot about how one mistake could contaminate the whole batch, or that was really part of the issue with the stuff that was being shipped over to China. Is that correct? Or do I have that wrong?
Well, no, a lot of it was contaminated. That was the problem. I mean, there was no standard, so that they were shipping everything over. And in the early days, China said, we just need anything and everything because we'll figure it out because we need the material so badly. Well, now China is able to work with their own infrastructure. They have enough material. They don't need all the other stuff like the caked on peanut butter jars and pizza boxes and all the other junk mixed in with the good plastic. It's contamination. And they have these, hand sorting methods that are completely, either unsafe or, they don't have the infrastructure to continue to do that. It doesn't make sense for them. So they said, you only send us really clean bales of what you have, or not at all, because that's not what we're going to take. So
then how, what was that percentage again? 93%?
93%. So
there's a very small percentage of stuff that Vermonters are recycling that is contaminated, I should say.
Yes, that's true. And there's always room for improvement, but and it becomes also a safety issue. We don't want to have stuff that goes in the recycling bins that doesn't belong, that can harm, injure a worker. Because they're actually in Williston and Rutland, it's hand sorted. They're putting it up on a conveyor belt, and they got a part of a second to see what's coming over and pull off what is contaminated or contamination potentially.
Or not recyclable, period.
Yeah, that's considered contamination. So a hose, shoes, textiles, metal, scrap metal that doesn't belong there.
But for someone like me and a lot of people in our community who are doing their best to recycle correctly, and we make a mistake, I feel bad about that. Like, I just learned something from you before the show, and now I'm like, oh my God, did I contaminate a whole batch?
No.
Or is that being caught?
A lot of it's
in the
caught.
process?
Yeah, a lot of it's caught, and a lot of it is not enough to contaminate an entire bale.
Okay.
So, if you get a piece of something that doesn't belong in an entire bale, it's not going to negate the entire bale,
Okay.
So it's.
But it sounds like we're doing really well. Is there any data Bennington County specific of how we're doing?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that, but I could get that data for you. I know that we're creating more trash, but we're also recycling more. And, it is what it is. But recycling's going up, so that's good.
Right. Well, I think it's encouraging to hear that our efforts, the little things that we do at home could be making that big of a difference, and that our state is excelling at this compared to, it sounds like, many others.
Yeah, it is doing well. As long as we continue to just keep our focus on, things that are specific to the recycling bin itself. There are a lot of people say, well, I'll just recycle more because I have more materials, but some of it obviously doesn't go in there. So
it's smart recycling.
Yes.
Is important.
Yes,
Right.
which we can cover in more detail in another segment.
Yeah, we can do another segment and talk about that. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk about in terms of how the pandemic has affected your job or, the solid waste world?
Yes, well, things are starting to open back up again more readily. I did my first Trash on the Lawn Day with some students at Sunderland Elementary School last month, and I'm going to do another one at Bennington Elementary School in a few weeks.
Nice.
And it's a great time to get all the kids outside, and they literally go through and sort trash to help them understand what is recyclable and what isn't, and how they can reduce the amount of material that they actually are generating through their consumption of goods.
Right. And then they go home and tell their parents,
That's right.
oh no, you have to recycle that, or
Yeah.
that can't go in there. So.
And we've also
great.
used a lot of the time this year to redevelop a new website, and that is something we're very excited about because it's much more interactive, user-friendly on a mobile device. We have a lot of downloadable materials that you can actually print off yourself that either the state has or we've created to help understand where things can be recycled properly, the proper methods to do it, understanding the laws and processes that are available to
So are there
Vermonters.
resources, like someone like me that always has questions on recycling? Can I go on that website
Yes.
and find out, instead of calling Paula and saying,
Yes.
can I recycle this? I could actually just go on the website.
Yes, and it's
So what is your website?
It's BCSWA.org. That's a new website address.
Okay.
So Bennington County Solid Waste Alliance.org.
So we'll make sure to put that title up on the show so people can access that information.
Yes, we're very excited about it. It's going to have a lot of good stuff.
So
and
that
my
must-
name is like on every page. You can call me or email me if you get stuck.
So that was, so the pandemic gave you some time to really work on getting
Yes.
that website done.
We still do outreach. I'm still going out to businesses, and I did at the beginning of the pandemic, especially last year, did online webinars, live tutorials to help people understand what the new solid waste laws for the food scrap ban and the single-use plastics ban and how that impacted people.
Both of those things happened during the pandemic. So I think that we're probably going to talk about those in more detail in upcoming segments, correct?
Yes, I look forward to that.
Good. Well, did you want to cover anything else in this show, or you want to?
No, unless you have any other questions about the state of recycling itself.
I don't think so. I think that was a really good overview, and I'm really kind of proud that Vermont is doing so well. And it's kind of like the pandemic itself. I was really happy to live in this state during the pandemic.
Yes.
And I'm happy to live in this state when it comes to recycling. So
Yes,
it's
brave
those are
little
good
state.
things. Those are good things.
Yes.